We have a quorum?
Yep. Well,
Well,
I'll do it on roll call.
yes,
I'm making that.
I suspect quorum.
You have anybody online?
So,
Larry G.
all right, so I'm calling the meeting to order. Call roll.
Nicholas Watnowski,
Present.
Welsh,
Present.
David McLaughlin,
Here.
Joe Brito,
Here.
Alan Watkins,
Here.
Tamara Banks, Larry Gross.
Here.
Okay. Yes, we have quorum.
All right, item 3 on the agenda, approval of the September 13th, 2023 agenda. Do I have a motion?
So Rupert, I'll move to approve.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So, agenda approved. Approval, number 4, approval of the August 9th, 2023 minutes. Do I have a motion?
Rupert, I move to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Okay. Public comment. Do we have public comment? Anyone on the line who needs to comment? All right. Hearing none. Next item on the agenda. Action/discussion items. 6A, the GWRC zoning and future land use 3D map with traffic data.
Connor, take it away.
All right, so you guys have done this, maybe you've seen this already. This app, FAMPO came out that shows zoning in the George Washington region as well as congestion. So congestion, and blurb will pop up when you open the app that shows you the directions for how to use it. But in short, what you see here,
Lights off.
turn those lights off. What you see here is the roadways of our region, and the greater the height is going to be higher congestion. So volume, VC ratio is volume to capacity ratio, and just imagine it as, say, roadway has a capacity of 50,000 vehicles in a day. If there are 50,000 vehicles using it in a day, then its VC ratio would be at 1, right? If there were less than 50,000 using it, the number would be below 1, and then more be above 1. Running at 1 means that the road is pretty congested. A number above that means there's a lot of congestion, etc. And so what you can do with this app is you can open the slides here, and we'll zoom into an area that we were talking about, which is Route 17. Maybe this is it. It's going to be between Geico and Route 95. And what you can do is you can click on the segment, the road segment. You'll see a pop-up where it says Route 17, and the VC ratio currently for 2022 is 2.04, which is severely congested. And what you see on the ground when we open back up the layer list, just to make this easier, I'll take this off and the legend, and you see what the current zoning ordinances are. So you'll see things like suburban residential is yellow, planned development commercial and commercial are red, etc. Industrial is blue. So you see kind of the layout of the counties, and you can look at that in relation to how much congestion there is on the roadway network. Right. You see North Stafford there, there's Fredericksburg, we can zoom out a bit. And this also includes Caroline and we go back to back up.
How current is this map?
This is all 2022. So these are the current zoning ordinances with the county. It's not the specific code because for each county there's going to be, I don't know, 40 different zoning ordinances, and they're all different county by county. So what I did was went into the zoning ordinance booklet for Fredericksburg, Stafford, etc., and we narrowed it down based on the codes to fit into these classifications. So we have like a mixed use land development, special overlay is going to be protected area, so that's like 1A. Agricultural, rural residential, which is going to be this area out here. Then you have suburban residential, urban. You see more of that in like the Aquia area and some areas of Fredericksburg, etc. So that's what the zoning is. And then you can click on this one, which is the layer list, which allows you to turn back on the volume to capacity ratio, which is our indicator of congestion. And what we see is a lot of the congestion is based west of 95. You know, Route 17 was is a big indicator here, but there's also Garrisonville Road is experiencing some severe congestion here. And what you can do with the app is it's interactive. So you just left click to drag and go around. And using the right click on your mouse, you can change the angle of how you're looking at the map to see how some of these road segments are going to compare to others, right? So if we go down here, you see how drastically, how much more congested Route 17 and Garrisonville Road are going to be compared to, say, 95 or Route 1, right? So that's kind of the use in a different perspective using a two-dimensional map. And it's interactive. You can click on it. You know, you'll get the pop-up, which shows you what the exact number is.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out when I was looking at it. It's kind of hard with the overlays on it.
Yeah, it can be kind of difficult. One of the things you can do is you can click on the I, which is going to be the about, and that will kind of give you a short summary. We also have a manual that John helped write up, which gives a little some more in-depth instruction into how to use the web app.
Why don't you go ahead and zoom in, so it gets as far down that you see basic building footprints as well. So you can actually go pretty far in, and kind of stitching together the 5 jurisdictions was actually a pretty significant task. So don't let Connor undersell that, because all 5 localities in our region actually have very, I would say, pretty different zoning requirements and land use requirements. And so getting A1 in Spotsylvania does not necessarily equate to an A1 zoning in Stafford County. So it was actually a pretty significant task to kind of stitch all those together. So the traffic part was the easier part. The land use was the more challenging item.
For those who, sorry. For those who don't, yeah, I'm just kind of piggybacking on what John said. For those who don't know software and design like this is really good. So yeah, this is, especially for our purposes. For our purposes of understanding what the challenges we're facing are, for understanding what needs to be done. This is amazing.
Another item, if you zoom out, you can also pick out some other trends that I would say planning school will beat this into your head, but if you pull up the volume to capacity, what you'll see is that if you have some of the lighter green zone, large swaths of it feeding into your primary routes. All of a sudden, as soon as it starts touching on that commercial or other type of land use, you see congestion balloon. You see that in 17 Route 3 and even 610 or Stafford. You don't see that as much, say, on the east side, but you definitely see it because you have a whole lot. If you zoom even on those light greens areas, you still have a lot of housing and population feeding into a smaller transportation network. That's the reason why you'll see all of a sudden, like Route 17 there, balloon, because you have a huge kind of housing watershed all feeding up to a singular point that has a combination of both commuter traffic as well as your general everyday going to Target or Lowe's or your general shopping. So you have a lot of different cross users all funneling into the same areas. So a lot of times folks think it's always going to be the higher density items that are going to spur traffic. That's not always the case. Actually, it's a lot of times even lower density items that, because the lower densities are pushed further out and funneling into the same road, you'll actually have more congestion as a result.
I think because I think that this backs that up, because if you look at the higher density areas, they don't have the VC ratio that, for example, 17 is not a dense area specifically.
I mean, you can see even Route 3 pushed all the way out there, it's already starting to pick up congestion far outside when you were.
Chancellorsville.
Yeah.
One thing you notice with Fredericksburg, like proper downtown, is it looks like a lot of traffic is funneling into it, but, you know, they have a pretty tight-knit grid network all in around here, and you see that, you know, congestion drop. You know, some of that is the fact that it's more residential streets, but, you know, it's still more dense than other areas of the region.
Eric, can you rotate it so that off of the high density on 17,
Yes.
so that we can see how much of that might be where it's exiting onto 95? Can you rotate it?
You want me to,
So we can see 95, because right now 95, we're looking at it on the edge as opposed to the
I
ribbon.
mean, this is volume and capacity, so 95 has a lot of capacity.
Right.
There's a lot of volume and capacity. This is where it's showing where the roadways
Right.
addition.
I just wanted to see if you could see a change at all right at the intersection. You know, for,
So these are tracking roadway segments based.
Right.
So it's not going, in some cases it can get like intersection, intersection. In this case, it's not quite necessarily that refined.
Well, presumably we'd see a difference between the west side of 95 on 17 and the east side of 95 on 17, correct?
as in,
Because it looks to me like the purple of 17 ends at 95, does it not?
right, yes, yes.
So what's the other side look like?
it looks like it actually ends at Sanford Drive instead of.
Yeah, the reason that there's this cutoff where it ends at Sanford Drive is just the way that VDOT had their map situated. You know, that congestion continues, but here is
Okay.
95 where the cursor is.
Right.
This is going to be that section west, and then this is the east side of 17. And the capacity ratio on this is going to be 0.91.
I mean,
So it drops by half.
really anything
More
over
than-
0.8, you're going to feel it and it's going to be painful. Anything over 0.6, you start saying this is congested. Like it's not waiting until you get to Route 1. Anything over 0.8 is going to be, this is heavy traffic.
Do we have VC data? I mean, I presume it's held by VDOT, but do we have VC data on surrounding counties? I'm not asking you to do this with surrounding counties at all, but
All of it for all.
okay. Cool. Do it. Maybe in the follow-up meeting after that, we could put that in the email that goes out after the meeting. Sorry, I'm losing words for a second.
Like put in the whole state or.
Yeah, where to find the VDOT information, because I'm curious. I'm curious how this compares to other counties and other areas.
We can see about something. We might not be able to host that amount of data.
No, of course not, and that's
But we
not
can
what I'm
kind of-
asking. But if I can look at say 17 and say that's a VC of 2.04, and then I can look at other roads in other counties and say, oh well, this one's are other counties looking at a VC of 1? Are they looking at a VC of 3? You know, what's going on there? I don't need the visual representation. I think this visual representation, the reason I wanted to put this on the agenda this month is because I think this is something we all need to look further into. And I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of it.
You want to toggle AADT so folks can see the true volume and how much 95 just warps everything.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I just want to say, if you look at the land mass between Truslow Road and the river on the west side of 95, you see it all channels to Route 17 to get to 95. So that's a large land mass. That's equivalent to roughly 2 election districts in Stafford County.
And I mean, yeah, you even see that regardless if it's Route 17 or Route 3 on this, right where Gordon Road comes in and you have that one segment, that's the only segment of Route 3 in Spotsylvania, you see the congestion in blue. It actually doesn't get worse as it approaches the interstate because you slowly actually have more and more of the road network in and around both Central Park and elsewhere that you can actually find a little bit of an alternative. You don't necessarily have that in the same.
Just lacking in the grid.
So, wanted to make sure everyone was aware of this. I don't think we had any particular action on this. Did you have anything else?
No, I just wanted to present it. So you guys, have access to it. That link is gonna work on your computers. Rupert, we'll try and figure out what the issue was that you had with your computer in the app.
Thanks.
But yeah, you know, it's accessible. You'll have the information, and then, there's also the user guide that we could send.
Excuse me, this is not,
John wanted to see the AADT. Do you still want to show that, John?
oh, I just want to know if this is not for the public yet, correct?
It's for the public. I mean, we consider it's available. It's been a public release. So yeah.
Yeah, so anyways, here's the AADT, which is total volume, which is different from volume to capacity ratio. And what you're gonna see is all of these roads don't nearly come close to what 95 has. And yet, in terms of how well they're running at, with how many lanes, et cetera, the road has, 95 runs better than many of the local state highways.
So if we just expand all our roads to 8 lanes, we'll be all
You
right.
gotta take stoplights, you gotta take stoplights off of them, that's what's causing it.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it. It's also capacity and it's also lack of alternatives.
You know, there's definitely a lack of alternatives.
Yeah.
But every time you come to a complete stop, that pretty much slows it all down too.
Well, how much does, I mean, when we're talking about congestion, congestion is volume on a road, right?
Can be, but depending on how that congestion, right? When you really get into the traffic congestion, it's going to be a mix. It's not just the number of folks moving through, but also then the number of folks who have to stop and yield to a lot of turning movements. So you can actually have a high volume on 2 different roads have the same volume, but one can feel a lot worse if you have to accommodate a lot of left turns. So in like shopping areas, with folks are darting in and out of every single thing, that can feel a lot worse than if you have the same amount of traffic where there's a limited amount of the capacity to make. You know, coming from North Carolina for the last 10 years where they like to have a 5th center turn lane everywhere that everybody's always trying to make a left turn.
That slows things down.
Yep, a 30,000 vehicle daily traffic count feels a whole lot worse than basically what the amount of traffic that's on Route 3 heading out to King George does, which has the exact same amount. Because the
Gotcha. Al, you had something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I also have issues trying to actually get to it. It was asking me for a FAMPO login and password.
really.
Yeah.
I had gotten an email from my coworker Becky saying that had been an issue, and I went in and fixed the sharing settings, so it should be available to the public. You have it to again email.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well, we'll ask the VDOT lady,
Yeah.
when's the 95 bridge completion stuff?
I don't know the dates they keep shifting.
What's the final design at 17? Is it back to a clover leaf or no?
No, that's to my knowledge. It's
3-part cloverleaf.
So what's the not part clover leaf? Left turn northbound?
Northeast part is gone. I have all the maps here, actually.
It'll be a left turn,
Just like Route,
stay, yeah.
just like Route 3?
It's gonna be a 3-lane left turn. There's gonna be more lanes going underneath the overpass. And VDOT put out on their Facebook page that they're also putting a sidewalk route underneath.
Sidewalk.
There's development plans for the east side, I think, where the clover leaf will not be.
What sort of development?
I don't know, it's still up in the air, but they're doing a park and ride on the other side of 17. I'm blanking on the name, but it's not very far off of 95,
Okay.
or even for that matter, from the other park and ride that's already on 17 toward Geico.
I just couldn't imagine a sidewalk going underneath the bridge with that.
Walkers under there.
Oh,
That's true.
with the,
They are, they're gonna take it whether it's safe or not, so
Yeah.
they'll make it safe.
Yeah.
I will try to avoid doing that, being 2 feet away from
Hey,
traffic.
yeah, you should have had a flyover there.
Or a
A
tunnel.
lot of shouldas. Are we good on this? Can we move on? Yeah, unless anyone has anything else to say.
I'd just like to see what that looks like after 95 is finished.
Yeah, well, that's 2022 data,
Finish.
so that's gonna be probably a
Yeah.
while coming,
A little bit.
right? Probably not done in 2023, and we won't have the data in 2024 until 25 at least, so.
I mean, I think currently it says spring of 24 is when the rulings will be.
All right, so next item on the agenda is congestion pricing.
Yep. Okay, this was added on Rupert's behalf. Unfortunately, you're gonna have me nerd out, so I'll apologize in advance. You're asking consumer transportation. That's actually what my doctoral work was basically on. So I was not congestion pricing specific. I was more on how people bought their automobiles and plan to use them. But we're going to dive into that. So I want y'all to kind of keep Connor's land use and traffic map in the back of your minds for local context, because ultimately that's what congestion pricing is trying to solve, particularly those dark purple peaks. They want to try to tap down the congestion, particularly during peak times in peak areas, as a way of either maximizing the infrastructure available or reducing travel times. I'm going to introduce you into kind of highways classifications of congestion pricing. A lot of times congestion pricing can kind of mean a little bit different things in different jurisdictions. I'm going to walk you through some of the research into the how, why, where, who, and because the when is the congestion, the what is the pricing. So we're going to focus on that. And then I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the perspectives of the transportation planner of what works and what doesn't, and then I'll let y'all open it up for discussion. One of the things I would like to point out is that we do have congestion pricing in the FAMPO region. In a weird way, with the new express lanes, we have it. With Amtrak's variable pricing options, we have it, and even some elements of the city of Fredericksburg with their, I think, parking, with how they charge per hour. That's quietly, parking fees are quietly a form of congestion pricing. So we do have it. And according to federal highways, you know, there are actually a lot of different mechanisms to do it. So with hot lanes, toll lanes or partial facility pricing, these are express toll lanes as well. You price part of the road that tries to say, pay a higher price, we'll give you a higher speed or level of service in exchange. But the whole facility isn't. So it's like kind of have a VIP section and a not VIP section available. You do have options elsewhere in the US, which is pricing on the entire roadway facility. If you've done 95, the New Jersey Turnpike, that is a prime example. What the United States doesn't have and is currently kind of in the early stages is the zone-based pricing or corridor-based pricing. These are in preliminary stages in Los Angeles and New York City. And then finally, you have region-wide pricing. This is a type of pricing where you basically charge the entire large area for using at peak times. We do not have that. That's something that's available in the Philippines. Strategies not involving tolls, parking, and as a parking manager, yeah, I would always want to try to charge the absolute most I could at peak times. Because I could actually have better parking availability depending on it. I always said you can have parking that's cheap, parking that's available, or parking that's accessible. Pick two. You're never going to have three without headaches. Other items is price vehicle sharing, dynamic ride sharing. So if you had like Cars to Go or even Uber, surge charging, we have that. And then you have pay as you drive. Oregon and Minnesota is kind of starting some pilot programs like that that's looking at DMT, but also considering, do we charge more during certain times than not? So that's the roadways. On the other side, congestion pricing or other variables are actually very common across all modes. Amtrak has it, airline industries is a common thing. The marine freight shipping world, I mean, you pay for your access to enter a port at specific times. If you have value sensitive or time sensitive, you're going to pay the most. If you're lugging like coal that really doesn't have as much of time, you might sit and wait for the cheapest. So you definitely have that. And then you have other utility pricing. If you have your electricity service provider has peak hour usages. So those are the types of congestion prices. That's kind of how Federal Highway starts to think about things. So that's how they do it. Congestion pricing from a general view. So really the first thing was introduced in Singapore in the 1970s. It's gone through several kind of revisions, but I always say that you kind of have to take Singapore with a grain of salt because they have a very unique transportation pricing metric, so that for us, a very affordable new car, relatively speaking, is $24,000. For them, it will be over $100,000 in US dollars equivalent. So they have it, but they have a very different thing. It's slowly been introduced in middle aughts into the later 2000 teens within European cities, particularly those with kind of a more urbanized and dense areas. So Stockholm, London, and a few others have had it. In the US, the congestion pricing has always been kind of tied to this idea of we're going to harness the market to reduce waste. That has been kind of a core US concept. But I would always point out, as being a consumer behavior, I'm saying what market and what's the waste? If congestion's your waste, that's kind of a unique thing from consumer behavior, because if I go to the market, all the unsold tomatoes are the waste, right? That would be underutilized road capacity, not necessarily congestion. So I'll always say that although it takes a very pro-market stance, it's not always really a true kind of market-based approach, because the sellers are going to be either government or private contractors, the buyers are facility users, it's more of a service, and the goods are kind of constrained, so it's not necessarily a free market approach. And one of the other core concepts is that congestion pricing works by pushing discretionary trips. And I always like to underline that, because what is considered discretionary is going to be very different from each potential consumer of our service. So it always kind of operates on the idea that the majority of users during rush hour are non-discretionary, or purely discretionary. And that is going to be a key issue that, particularly within the US context, is going to be a problem. And I would always say, does that apply to Fredericksburg when our congestion is hitting? So I used an example over in New York City. They're looking at their corridor zones, and they show you the amount of daily traffic volume coming on the bridges. We can rival that within our own region from pure AADT. Now, granted, that's coming into a lot smaller area than our region, but you still have a large amount of vehicles coming in, but we see similar traffic within that area.
Doesn't seem relevant. I mean, the number of vehicles is not relevant. What's relevant is congestion. You can have a lot of vehicles, no congestion in one situation, few vehicles, a lot of congestion in another.
So the core to the congestion pricing has this kind of overarching concept. You have the idea that if you have regular stop and go traffic, you can have congestion pricing. And that will have a twofold thing of either inducing less people to drive as well as raise funds to then pay for alternatives. And if you have fewer people driving, you kind of have these other advantages with clean air delays and so forth. And therefore, the transportation network is fixed and you have a better quality of life. I'll get to that. It's going to be a little bit messier, but now is the time you have to say, you have to forgive me because I'm about to go into deep consumerism here. So quarter pricing coming out as a preferred alternative actually gets its big push in the mid-90s. You had a lot more academic research going into it at this point in time. Keep in mind, there has not been a congestion pricing scheme other than Singapore, and even then, her major revision happened in 1997. So a lot of the research going into this, into the behavior, was happening in the early 90s. So you start seeing a general consensus that.
I'm sorry, did you say that Singapore is the only place that's done congestion pricing?
They're the only ones who did it when this topic starts coming up through kind of the planning and the research stage. So this is an idea. There is no approach to it as a corridor, or I should say as a corridor pricing scheme. And you're going to have that come out in the mid-90s after I've seen a couple other things as this becomes a bigger and bigger option, which is going to slowly lead to the later adoption in about 10 years from the first few European cities.
But how about the concept of not using congestion pricing for an area, but using it for a road, like 95?
Yeah. So yes, so that research is going behind, but the research in the 90s is starting to say you need to start looking at the pricing in the area. That's going to slowly become the big push, and that's the reason why the European cities start doing it. Because what they concluded is that the behavior, that the assumption that you can just charge more to make people save time is kind of a false game. Folks aren't behaving like that in general. So if you're dependent on saying,
The point wasn't to have people save time, the point was to relieve congestion.
no, the point was to start offering it as a way to save time, and the benefits all reduce congestion as well. But that's where it's coming from.
All right, so that's news to me because I always thought the point of congestion pricing was to relieve congestion.
It was a mechanism to allow those who are willing to pay a better user experience. It's been slowly turned. That's why you start seeing a little bit of a kind of shift in the approach, and why this research group said that accordion pricing is best because it kind of shows users kind of the cost and the options of doing it to reduce it. It wasn't done. Like if you were saying we're going to reduce congestion, there's a reason why there was a 10-year gap between the first HOV lane being introduced in California, because they took out a lane to put in an HOV lane. Folks revolted, they removed it, and it took about another 10 years to say that you only add HOV lanes if you're adding an additional lane. You always marry it to an increase in capacity, even though that wasn't necessarily a requirement before. So when congestion pricing was first coming out, other than Singapore basically using it as a very large tax, the idea that you charge people money to use it at peak times was a theory that we're going to allow folks to buy basically a better service. It wasn't to say we're going to remove congestion, at least not initially. So it's kind of, you can see this kind of thing coming up, and you still see that in even the First Express advertising. They're like promoting how much time you're going to save by using this new service. There is time savings there, but that's kind of a legacy, the kind of proto-American way of viewing the high occupancy toll lanes, of selling this as an item, that there is a time savings, although the buyer behavior doesn't necessarily match that model. So how people interact and invest in that option isn't exactly. Having folks give you a value on time is a very difficult way. If you're trying to model or predict how many people are going to use it based on their time savings, that's a struggle in the buyer behavior. There's some value because people's value on time fluctuates
I
greatly.
don't see the problem with this study. I mean, you just keep charging until you get the congestion relieved.
We will get to that. So, So I'm gonna fast forward and say, okay, that was research that was done before congestion pricing went in effect. Now let's look at some research that happened after congestion pricing. As a whole, in areas that apply congestion pricing in a corridor area, they have seen a reduction in trips. It's about 20%. So in this case, you had Stockholm, Sweden. They're averaging just a little bit under 500,000 vehicles entering in their core area. It drops to under about 400,000. It's kind of stayed kind of flat there. So you can kind of see it. They came in, they did the test. They actually opened it back up and they still had a drop. My one caveat is that as you're slowly working towards your late 2000s recession here, and you actually started seeing even US VNT start to drop off. So it's kind of happening at the same pace, but you'll see that it's about a 20% drop across the board. Congestion pricing does decrease traffic towards heavily congested areas. That's kind of the key thing, is it does reduce it and it does it towards it. And across the European context, it has been successful as a way of discouraging individuals from driving into those congested areas. And that's going to be kind of the key, into those congestion areas. It doesn't necessarily remove congestion outside of it, but it does inside. So you see Stockholm, they literally have options. I put a map of London down here. Their congestion pricing zone is very small compared to the overall area. And to give you an idea, that ring road around is the M25. It's akin to 495 in DC, almost same scale, very similar. So you kind of get you an idea of that. They have seen that kind of moving on, that quarter pricing programs do have a pretty big impact on regular commuters. Either you can afford the congestion pricing and therefore you actually do report, hey, this is working great because I can drive through, as well as those who can't afford it. They note that, you know, I have to take a much longer route or a different mechanism and it costs them more money, even if they are not actively involved going in and out of the corridor, because they may use different routes to accomplish the same thing if you're in traffic.
I would object to it cost more money for those who can't afford to take because the tolls can go towards mass transit, so that the poor guy before, he had to have a car to get to work. Now with congestion pricing, you might be able to ride to work for free on the subway or bus or streetcar or whatever.
Well, keep in mind that one, that requires that transit exists, and I actually pulled out, this is actually towards South Bend, Indiana, and a toll road, that there is a toll or cost that's independent, including the corridor and congestion pricing area, that if you are through traffic, if you're trying to move from one point to another that's around it, you might actually have to drive more and cost you more money, even if you don't access the congestion charge. So you would actually have to do a more circuitous route that costs additional money. And in some cases, like this example, they were finding that it may actually be leading to additional traffic congestion in areas that either do not have the roadway capacity for it. They might be underserved communities to begin with.
Who cares about those? You're getting congestion off the road that you're concerned about.
You're getting the congestion off the road you're concerned, but you're just displacing it to another area.
So who cares? If that's an important route, put congestion pricing on that too. Point is, you know, you got the congestion off the road that was important.
They displaced them.
Accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. And this business about the guy having to go all the way around the circuitous route to get to work.
I'm not talking about to get to work. I'm saying any trip.
Okay, whatever. Take the bus, maybe for free, because the high rollers that are paying congestion pricing, now put the money into transit.
That's if it's served, and that's going to be the key point of congestion pricing, is that you have to have an alternative to those trips that do it, or it becomes a regressive tax.
Well, what's the problem there? I assume that you give the United States free market economy more credit and think that, you know, as soon as there's a problem, you know, like created by congestion pricing, if government doesn't step forward and provide those streetcars or whatever, the free market economy is probably gonna jump in a heartbeat. Sort of about it being involved.
I think Los Angeles would have some negative things to say about the free market's effect on public transit.
But
I think Los Angeles would have some negative things to say about the effect of the free market on public transit and transportation alternatives. But maybe we could go back to John's presentation.
that's not your only concern as far as trying to introduce congestion pricing. You start looking at a lot of other public perception behaviors, you have other concerns. Personal privacy over tracking trips, they're going, I mean, just start looking around at folks with the privacy screens over their license plates. To make congestion pricing work, you're going to have a mechanism of ensuring and capturing that you know how people are traveling within the region. London has very different public private or personal privacy concerns than the United States does. You have questions over fairness. If you start displacing traffic from one neighborhood to another, is that really the burden of that neighborhood to absorb the traffic that is displaced by another? You have an increasing amount of risk if you're throwing more traffic into the alternatives are not able to capture. There's a question over implementing it, variable pricing out, and then the question is, what's the fair cost of a trip?
That's the question.
Administrative issues.
It's not what's the fair cost of the trip. The question is, what do you need to charge to reduce the congestion?
We will ask that question at the end, but yeah, that gets into it, because here's the question. If you really want a market approach, don't try to price out your users. And that's what I'll slowly get back to, that if you start looking at the congestion pricing, you can't come at it as a market approach. You can't look at it as a market approach. But that is kind of the fundamental thing of selling it within the United States, that this is somehow a market-based approach to solving congestion.
Sounds like it's one thing, but I'm just talking about the principles of how it works. All you do is you keep adjusting, keep increasing the tolls until you
Price out the users to only those who can afford it can access it. So I applied London's Cordon pricing scheme, as well as their ultra low emissions vehicle, which is kind of a congestion charge and kind of not. It's kind of dual functioning there. It's actually looking at air quality emissions, but you have to have a new enough vehicle to enter in that outer ring without paying a tax. So there is a tax of older vehicles on that. So limits of corridor pricing. It increases or encourages commercial sprawl. Basically, any area outside of that zone is going to become a market advantage to any area that's on the inside. So it could actually increase sprawl and congestion. It tends to work against car owners with low incomes because the charges are regressive, and you have to make sure that whatever gains you may get from a congestion charge has to go into mitigating that, because if your idea that your congestion charge is then going to go back in to pay for the same road that's charging the congestion, you've created a huge potential issue.
It's a problem using toll products to transit. So people take a transit alternative. They can take the same road they've always taken. They maybe take it for free. Maybe be able to
have to ensure that, and that's not always been the mindset to funding American transportation infrastructure. That would be it. You also have to upgrade and cause a lot more enforcement. So there is going to be a very strict kind of law enforcement side to it that basically a jurisdiction has to be willing to entertain.
They already do that. I don't see where they need extra law enforcement. All you do is you have the scanners that read your license plate and send you a bill.
Yeah, there's been notable challenges with those implementations. But you have to have it working correctly. Otherwise, you're always going to run into an issue of, if it's not working correctly, you can't enforce it. And if you can't enforce it, are you making effective convention price? Finally, the bypass roads will experience heavy congestion translating to long operational hours. So it's like you really have to have a big enough catchment area so that you're not incentivizing those outside the area. So you're not incentivizing folks using bypass roads. So if your congestion is the bypass roads, then congestion pricing cordon or even a facility charge isn't going to work as effectively if your congestion is already the outlying facilities.
It would have worked perfectly. So,
Which I'll get into that question in a minute. And this is where I'll also think is you really need to have a situational object person behavior approach to congestion pricing. I'll go ahead and share my suggestion. Every single time 95 backs up and comes to a standstill, put a toll on the off ramps. Charge them to access Route 1, charge them to access 17, Route 3. If you're stuck in 8 hours of traffic on 95, how much is it going to cost you to use the secondary roads rather than 95 backing up? Because the situation and the object, in this case, the time savings, is going to play into a factor in the person's behavior and their willingness to pay for something. And that is very much a cultural behavioral approach. So you want to do congestion pricing that actually helps. Sometimes you have to invoke the items, but I'm jumping ahead. So you can't just assume that people are going to not do something based on cost, or they will do something on cost. You also have a lot more inelastic or unflexible behavior, and it can be very wildly. So you can't just assume that every single person is going to take a rational, I'm going to save this much money versus my time versus that. They're not doing those calculations. Things get a lot more wonky in trying to determine the value that makes these things work. So what does congestion not work on? It doesn't work on freight. It doesn't work on service deliveries or commercial trips. If you have a job, if you're a plumber, you're taking the trip. Now the question is, are you taking the bypass roads to go around, or are you going to pay the congestion charge? You're making that trip. Mandatory trips. Now I'll get into this. What is a mandatory trip? I'll jokingly say, me, my kids to childcare so I can come to work is a mandatory trip. That might not be a mandatory trip for somebody else. It might be something else. A mandatory trip for somebody could be driving to the beach for the annual vacation. So charging 95, maybe, but it varies. That's where kind of some of the breakdowns come, because for some people, if you can afford it, you can afford it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a mandatory trip. So that's where it kind of does it. So you have issues with value to replacement. This comes again if you're doing dynamic pricing. If you're doing automobile dependent trips, if you don't have the infrastructure, you're just taxing. Folks are going to do it. They're going to pay it. You collect more money for it, but you won't see the same benefits that you saw, say, in Stockholm or London with the drop in BMTs. You also have a retail restaurant redistribution. Areas outside the congestion price and on the off-ramps, we see this with variable tolls. Folks, McDonald's, with locations right before the toll, saw some of the best sales they ever had as a result, because folks would literally, if the price was $5, they'll get off, wait till it's down to $2, have a cheeseburger and then get back on. You had a lot of dumping traffic into kind of the commercial retail areas right before some of the variable pricing. And locations inside might see a very sharp decrease even as peak pricing is reduced. So you won't just impact the trips that are coming in during peak, you also impact the trips throughout the day. You'll see a reduction. So the idea of congestion pricing kind of looks like this, okay? The reality is it's a very complex thing that has a lot of variables, and you're starting to mix human behavior into a very empirical engineered kind of approach to transportation decisions. So we raise funds, but a quarter of all those funds on 95 are going to Transurban.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's how we decided to manage our congestion pricing in this area. You don't always have the pay for alternatives approach. You don't always have fewer people driving, because currently right now, I think if I pull that, you're wealthy, 10% of your household income goes to transportation. If you're under $45,000 in household income, it's close to 30%. If you don't have the alternatives, if you don't have the walking infrastructure, if you don't have the biking infrastructure, if you don't have the carpool community, you're still not going to do it. And so you get into a lot messier items. And even then, I can replace congestion pricing with other basically taxes and actually have the same model working out. If I tax fuel, I can raise fund and have fewer people driving. In fact, I'll say I can do that a lot easier. Oh, when fuel prices spike, BMTs drop. And I can say,
A fuel tax would reduce driving all across the board.
it'll reduce congestion everywhere.
Well, that's not.
And if I use that fuel tax to pay for alternatives,
It's reduced protection on one particular road or one particular neighborhood. You know, so you're bringing up something totally irrelevant.
I can accomplish the same thing with a different tax. Same with VMT tax. I can do it through property tax. I can do it through entitlement pricing, which is basically
None of
a
those-
lottery to pay that access to have a vehicle.
None of those things would reduce just on a specific road.
Yes, every single one of those will do it. They can do it across all jurisdictions. I can accomplish the same things here. But if I don't have regular stop and go traffic and if I have a dispersed travel patterns, congestion pricing falls apart. All these work with
That's
those.
exactly right. You wouldn't even charge congestion pricing if the roads aren't congested.
Exactly.
Yeah. So why bring it up? That's.
So here's my question. Where would you put congestion pricing in this region?
So,
Where would you put congestion pricing in this region? In this region?
this region. We should have done, if back when we had 2 lanes north and 2 lanes south on 95, was when they got credit putting congestion pricing. Instead of adding a 3rd lane and then waiting for that to get congested, and then having the hot lanes put in down the middle.
But
We could have saved the cost.
congestion
We
pricing
could have
on
gone,
95 right
I'm
now.
sorry,
We have congestion pricing on 95 right now.
we got it on 95, we got it on the hot lanes.
Well, that's a form of congestion pricing.
Yes.
That's, so we have congestion pricing on 95 right now.
Well, I was complaining about not having congestion pricing back when we started talking about widening 95 and putting in the hot lanes. That was an alternative that if we had in place now, would bring in buckets of money. And a lot of local folks could use that money to ride probably for free, but they didn't have to buy a car to get to DC and back. That's where we blew it, where we should use congestion pricing instead of putting down all this asphalt.
We could spend a lot of time talking about what we should have done. But if we're talking about the future,
Okay, well, for the future, instead of, once this gets all wrapped up, you know, or for nine, matter of fact, we could do it right now, on Sundays, but 95 gets all wrapped up anyway. So you can institute congestion pricing on Sundays, when things start getting crowded.
but I think what John was saying is that without a transit alternative, which there's not a good transit alternative right now,
Well,
not for locals. You can avoid Fredericksburg if you take the train. You can avoid Fredericksburg if you're flying, I guess. But there is not a good transit alternative to going through Fredericksburg right now, the region. And so congestion pricing would become a tax, meaning that if I, a teacher who doesn't make a whole lot of money, want to go up to visit my parents in Washington, D.C., I'm going to have to pay $20 to go see my parents, whereas previously it was free. Well, cost of gas.
But if we do it in a region where we control, I would say any idea of putting congestion pricing around the city of Fredericksburg, if anybody, at least within the city council, city residents, you can have your own opinion, put that in place. Remember what I said, it shifts revenue away from it. Fredericksburg basically imports sales tax. Per resident, they are booking it. So if you put any type of congestion pricing, like Fredericksburg would want absolutely none of it, because that would be tax based.
And it would also make our congestion worse because where's the commercial zoning right now? It's 610 and 17s, and those would be outside of the congestion.
What would be the alternatives? There are no alternatives. Fredericksburg could put up a toll and say, basically give us the Delaware tax and say, hey, but the state won't allow that, so.
can't imagine anyone thinking about that as long as it's not congested. Right now, it's not congested.
Well, but
So where would you put it in this region?
I'm telling you, on 95.
that's the end of Route 1 as a viable highway. That's the end of Route 1 as a viable highway. It's a Yeah, I think if I'm interpreting correctly, and correct me if I'm not, you're the one with the doctorate here.
I did
The,
it wrong.
yeah, my degree's in film, I'm useless. But if you put congestion pricing on 95, then everyone goes to Route 1. Well,
Any other alternative in that?
well, if you're going north-south, it's Route 1. And that means that Route 1, which is a 2-lane highway, or how do we count?
4-lane.
4-lane highways. Sorry, I always get mixed up on that. A 4-lane highway is now a parking lot. And so that means that if, you know, you want to go get some decent Korean food and you live on 17 and you want to go up to 610, you're now going to take 3 hours to go get some Korean food because now 95 is $50 to get through the.
Well, where's our congestion in the region?
It's in 7.
Connor's map. That's where congestion pricing, those are the quarters that congestion pricing is supposed to fix.
Right.
That's where you put your congestion pricing. How much would you pay to access Route 17?
I'd pay anything because I live off 17.
You have no other choice.
Yeah.
And that's,
The scenario that you described is totally accurate, but with enough of that over enough time, you got the incentive for a lot of things to happen. Like people change their travel habits, like maybe not taking every weekend to run down south and visit their friends in Richmond. Or people deciding to live a little closer wherever it is they're traveling, or more businesses being encouraged to open in areas, you know, where the traffic is. Things can be, a lot of things can happen, not to mention the fact, getting the public transit, you know, as a result of all the increased traffic in that area. A lot of things can happen over time, when you have a change like that.
but I pulled up, here's our current congestion cost. And I pulled current trips because I have fun and see, look, I missed.
Well, this is just completely invalid then.
Yeah, no, I pulled an EV trip. If you're driving a smaller 4-cylinder vehicle, you can probably push this close to 50. If you're driving one that's like 25 years old, has a whole bunch of miles, even with maintenance costs, you can probably get it under $50 now. But the average kind of cost to drive from Fredericksburg to DC is $30. If you factor in, sorry, I should be up here. If you factor in the congestion charge, if you access the hot lanes, you are basically doubling the cost of the trip. That's how much
Where's the line that says free ride on the transit? Well,
what free ride? Sorry, what free ride?
might be free, depends on how many people you bring in.
If there's VRE on a Friday, it's free. But any other time, there's no free ride.
And how long is VRE even free? It's not, that's not a permanent thing.
It was promotional.
That's because we don't have.
Yeah, it's not free anymore, so.
Rides to DC on the bus, is because we don't have the tolls from congestion pricing.
But these tolls aren't gonna have that kind of revenue to pay for, am I wrong here? Like, that's.
Well,
I think it's
this is a,
unfair for you not to list the alternative of being able to ride to DC on transit subsidized by the tolls of congestion pricing. Not on that day.
there we go. One-way trip at 7 a.m. It's going to have dynamic pricing between $11 and $50.
Why is the difference between 48?
Washington to Fredericksburg,
It's the difference between 48 and 30.
Business class.
business class. So, and this is dynamic. So this was, I forget when I forecasted out the day. I don't think I did it like that day, like the day of. I think I pushed it out like a week or two.
That looks like,
So,
that
yeah.
looks like 2 weeks.
So I did it on the 7th and I did it for the 12th. So the closer you get it to the actual day where you would actually have dynamic pricing, you have to plan out your trips.
That doesn't respond to my statement, though. My statement was, the tolls we get, congestion pricing, could go towards free bus service. Typically here in DC.
Or working for Express is paying for services. 25% goes to Transurban, and then they cut a check for various issues. Some of it goes to 95, some of it goes to transit. Some of it doesn't even go to our region. It goes to Prince William, Fairfax, and other ones. They cut the Northern Virginia Authority a check. You have Omni Ride, I think that serves.
Okay, well, you wouldn't even have multiple public, both things, but you don't know how much money congestion pricing bring in. So you could have 40 bus service, or you could have 50% paid subsidized bus service.
Like, how
You
much?
have an alternative that you didn't bother to put in that last payment.
But that's my question. How much should a congestion trip cost?
No, that's not relevant. You know,
It's pretty relevant to the people who are trying to get to work.
it's not- you know, I know exactly how much it costs enough to keep the road free of congestion. That varies all over the place.
Yes, it does vary all over the place because I would jokingly say, coming from a different, like being here, leaving this area. You know, if a road had 40,000 vehicles in Western North Carolina, they'll be renting and raving, electing all the bums out. How dare you not solve this congestion? The idea of Route 3 existing in Asheville, North Carolina is beyond it, but that is the acceptable thing in our region.
Politically, it's not gonna work.
It varies wildly between both areas and the human context. If you want to take a human behavior market approach, how much does a congestion trip cost to make it effective, as well as being politically viable? Because I guarantee you, those who cannot pay it, who are then priced out and have no other option other than to pay it, if there are no other options already existing, you have to have that transition work before you get
There are options, but I'm saying there should be other options, because you have extra money.
You should have other options, but the question is, if you don't, what do you do?
It should be put out there instead of being hidden. I mean, I've had that complaint ever since I've been going to these meetings, that whenever you've got a road project on the boards, it could equally be solved by congestion pricing. It should state on there, you know, on that project, we can do this, it's gonna cost this much money, or if congestion pricing were legal, it could be solved by congestion pricing. Because people don't even know that congestion pricing is an alternative.
Within the FAMPO region, there is not one road that will be solved with congestion pricing. Even with having it in our area, all it is diverting the high occupancy lanes onto non-charged things, which is creating a better user experience for those who are willing to pay the money.
And you're bringing in a bunch of money. So we can make a solutions.
It's a luxury item. It's not infrastructure.
And that's when you ultimately get to what, if you're going to approach this from a market item, you have to look at it from as a luxury item that has a very complicated value through a consumer approach. And if you're looking at it as just a tax to reduce traffic, people aren't going to like that is politically unfeasible within at least the American context. And I would say that across the board.
And even politically, even if you push aside politically, it seems to have the same impact as raising gas prices, which, you know, you still gotta get to, like, it's what you're talking about, the mandatory trips. You still have to get to work, you still have to go visit family on specific moments, you still have to go to the grocery store, you still have to do all that stuff. So all you're doing is reducing households' monetary value. I'm not sure what the right word is because it's late.
But you make
Yeah.
people,
Disposable income, thank you. So, yeah, I am cognizant of the agenda right now, though. Are there more key points you have on the?
This is
All right. So thank you very much, John. I learned a lot today. And are we good to move on? Everyone good? Rupert, you've expressed your opinions?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay. Anyone else have opinions? No? I hear everyone has one, but okay, sorry. Moving on to 6C.
So up currently right now are a few tip amendments. These are currently open to public comment from members of the community, as well as open for this body to take action to basically endorse these changes. First one up is actually adding a third rail, just a little bit north in North Stafford. to the main north-south line, and this is a request from the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority as a part of their, they are solely ticking all the boxes to do a major rail expansion. So this is one of the first, big
Real-
projects coming up.
Okay.
Real quick, you said third rail, that's not electrified.
No, not
Okay.
third travel.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, I got it. Sorry, no, it's a third track, let's use that.
Okay.
Do you have a map, specific? That one map is really
Yeah.
bad.
That is what,
Can't really see anything.
Palma, Cleveland.
Well, the problem is that Connor didn't make it,
Yeah,
so.
sure. This is what was provided to us by the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. We don't actually make.
So there's no bridges or maybe going over a couple roads?
Yeah, they're going over a couple, I think they have a couple,
Potomac Creek,
yeah.
bridge,
Is it Potomac Creek Road? Really over by,
which is,
that isn't really much of a bridge though.
So,
well, that's a big one.
I mean, we need more rail.
What about a quiet? Is the quiet on there or not?
So you're saying that, at, the, marina there?
That's a quiet.
Yeah,
I read just there, it was a Potomac Creek crossing,
yeah.
which is, at
I
the,
think that's Aquia Creek, yeah.
at the end of Leland Road is where it crosses,
Do we,
Potomac Creek.
do we need, endorsements for each specific proposal, or do we want to do it as a batch?
you can do it as a batch or you can do it individually. That's the choice of the committee.
Okay, do I have a motion to endorse the individual, or do we have further discussion?
Yeah, I would like a discussion there. Can you raise that up a little bit so you can see the total cost?
That's 37 million.
Okay, 143 million. Divide that by 3.9 miles. It comes to $7,941 per linear foot. $7,941 per linear foot of track. And I believe it's all inside the right of way, so there's no right of way to be purchased. And it just seems like an outrageous price.
That's federal money, right? Seems high, but does the federal government do anything cheaply?
So suppose the federal government goes broke in the next 5 years.
We got bigger problems.
Okay.
And
We won't need any transportation infrastructure because there's going to be a whole lot of folks sitting home.
Well, that's what I'm looking forward to, actually.
Especially in this area.
But like I said, the cost seems outrageous. 3.9 miles is almost half of the southbound 95 local lane project. I mean, that was like 7 miles, included a bridge over the Rappahannock, and was roughly the same total.
Bridges were separate projects. There were 130 million per.
Yeah, well, I'm saying southbound. I'm saying the southbound project was like somewhere, it was roughly at the same price as this, but you have 3 lanes plus a bridge over the Rappahannock, and it was 7 miles long. Now we're comparing.
No, actually, this would be half of the 95 bridge in cost. Like just one of the new spans was approximately what this cost.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Not
What-
the 7 miles, just
what-
the bridge section.
What,
I thought it included 7 miles of road.
Just the
And what-
bridge segment.
what step in the process is this? Is there further review in terms of costs that would happen? What does our endorsement allow to occur?
Basically, this is, your endorsement will say, yes, this project should proceed, or no, this project should not. This is kind of the last
Okay.
hurdle for this.
So there's not further review in terms of the finances? Okay.
I don't know where exactly they are in, but I would not just say that this is a back the neck, and that this is usually, when you're going into the tip, you are going to be fully funded. Like that is the amount that it expects. And we can get into kind of how they move money around in the next section, but yeah.
To be on the tip doesn't have to be already on a plan.
Constrained long range plan, yes, it's already done. The tip is the final signature.
And so planning committee is voting on this next meeting, and
Yeah.
they basically, this is our chance for input.
And the TAC Where-
Well, I agree that we need a third rail. So if we're voting on that, I make a motion to approve or.
Motion to approve this, to endorse
Endorse.
Yeah, I
this
mean,
resolution?
I'm not liable for the money, so.
Yeah, it's not coming out of my bank account.
Yeah, so, but I think they do need a third rail.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Rupert. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Here.
One opposed. Majority carries. Motion, for endorsement passes.
And I'm just opposing because of the cost.
I don't
Okay.
blame you. I don't blame you on that.
Let's go ahead.
$5,000.
So the next is actually bundled to the FY 21-24 tip. We have a couple of projects coming in here. So it is including the study for the river crossing on needs alternative studies. It's also major changes to the Route 1 and exit 126 southbound improvements, as well as changes with the exit 126 star study improvement, which this is how they break up like one big project into a lot of things. And kind of you can go ahead and scroll down, let folks know. So you have the $600,000 for the river crossing study that's going in for fiscal year 24, which is current. And these will probably come before you again in another one because we have to amend the 27 or 24-27 tip because technically the rollover is in October. So you can scroll down on this one. And then you have VDOT is moving a little bit of money around, and this is the reconstruction and added capacity for a mile north on Route 1 to Market Street, and the total cost for that is about $15 to $16 million. They're just adding small amounts of CMAC and surface transportation funds to the project, as well as they're doing small amendments to the actual 2023 costs. And you can scroll down, adding $5 million there. And then we also have kind of the project that was identified in the STAR study. They're doing about, what's it, $27 million in the PE phase and right-of-way phase for this project. So it's VDOT's moving and spending money around, so this is typical for these types of projects. But because it was a fair amount of money for the full change.
So we're looking at studies of Route 1, right?
No, these are right away cost
Improvement.
construction cost
Okay.
of the changes happening.
What was the study? I heard a study.
The river crossing.
River crossing. So
That's
am I missing anything else?
what,
Widening Route 1, adding a lane.
Adding capacity, they're adding some turn lanes, or like the on ramps are going to become like doubles in a couple of areas.
This is all the connection with the 126, I think.
Okay. That needs more capacity.
It's just more asphalt. I'd be opposed to that.
Do I have a motion? Do I not have a motion?
Next item.
Yeah, I guess that's, do we want to vote on these separately? Because I want to see movement on that river crossing. Does anyone, do we want to, can we endorse these individually?
The TAC separated.
Yeah, the policy committee separated the endorsements as well. Do I have a motion on the river crossing study?
I move.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
We go back to the top page. So, according to this, the last part of the last sentence, a host of public hearings at the September 18th, 2023 policy.
Yes.
So they're going to allow the public to come and speak about it one at a time. And then the end of the comment period is on the 20th, I guess, for public comments. Okay.
So motion on the floor is to endorse the furtherance of the river crossing study. Okay. All understanding there? Motion with a second.
What are you agreeing to me?
All in favor?
I,
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, I'm gonna have to call for a roll vote on that.
Okay, go for the city of Fredericksburg, David McLaughlin.
I,
Nick Wapnowski,
Aye.
Joe Brito,
Aye.
Al Watkins,
Aye.
all right, Tim Welsh,
No,
and Tamara Banks.
Tamara.
Tamara, sorry,
Abstain.
abstain.
Yeah.
Okay, and Larry
No.
and Rupert.
Nay.
Okay,
you didn't ask for discussion.
On the
on
motion.
this Motion.
Sorry. Did we have further discussion on the motion?
I want Spotsylvania added to the NEPA study.
You want Spotsylvania added to the NEPA
I
study?
said that in the last time we approved that thing too, but that's the reason I vote nay.
Okay. That's interesting.
they are included on the process. So yes, they're included. It's just not.
It ain't in the black and
Didn't
white.
they vote it out?
Yeah.
They,
Well, Spotsy doesn't want it.
a policy committee, well, some members of Spotsylvania voted not to advance the project.
Okay.
Not all. And the CTAC staff had voted not to advance the study. So
That's interesting.
well,
Okay.
your bosses said no.
Wait a minute, back the truck up on that one?
Hmm?
What did you say?
Well, typically at the TAC, if
Which is a technical,
so there's Spotsylvania staff
right?
and they report to their supervisors. Typically, you don't see a lot of disagreement on that one. And that's across tax, across a lot of NPOs.
Uh-huh.
So,
And there is disagreement. Or no, okay, sorry.
I disagree with Spotsylvania County
Mhm.
board members.
That's what I'm hearing. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
because if you go turn that NEPA in with just a connection between Fredericksburg and Stafford,
Mhm.
they're gonna study the river between Fredericksburg and Stafford.
Right.
If you put Spotsylvania on that NEPA, then they're gonna study from the Caroline County line to the Culpeper County line.
Uh-huh.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Which is what we need to be studying.
I have to find myself in agreement with that.
That's the reason I'm voting
Okay.
against.
Can we note that objection or?
yes, I will note that objection.
Okay. So having the vote,
Hmm?
The next bridge.
Yeah.
having the vote, I believe the motion to endorse carries. All right, with the objection noted. All right. Do we want to vote on the other elements of that, or we did not have, the motion to endorse the entirety did not pass. Do we have any motions on the other elements of this that we want to see, anyone wants to see pass?
I mean, as a Spotsylvania guy, and the other two are exit 126, I
Mhm.
feel like I should approve that. Although I don't know what in the world they're doing. I would love to see a plan. And if it's some retarded left turn movement at a light, I'm not for that. We need to get beyond traffic lights around here, okay?
Roundabouts.
Well, we need
No,
to
I'm
use
thinking
actual roundabouts.
flyovers or something.
Okay.
We need to be separated grade interchanges.
I
Okay?
do believe that's a
It-
conversation for another day.
Well, I understand. Anyway, but I don't know what's in it.
Right, I understand. Can we pull it up so we maybe take a closer look?
It doesn't help.
No, okay.
No. We need.
So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I mean, I'll approve it because that's what we're looking for, but I'd really like to see some plans.
To-
What
To,
we're doing here.
Do we have a second?
to do this right, we have to, as CTAC members, we would have to take a look at this and then look up that project and get into the details that you're asking about. What does it really do? Because you get these little snapshots. For us who are professional planners, it's just, reconstruction with added capacity, that's what it tells me there, and it's in this area of the highway. You really have to, we have to, that's the only way we can do it. And
I mean, let me say that we are spending, Lord knows what we are spending on Route 1 right now, and it probably needs to be done anyway. But if you take 17 bypass, where it comes across 95, if they had, and I don't know what they're doing up there, that's a fiasco that's been going on for 2 years too. They did one slip lane onto I-95 northbound. Do you know how much traffic that would take off Route 1? That's got to go down to Route 1 underneath the bridge to get on I-95? It is a simple fix. But I don't know who's running that show,
that ship seal.
obviously.
So-
That's the kind of stuff drives me crazy, just to keep rubber stamping.
Exactly. We
Idiot.
need more details and we have no plans in front of us. We just want to rubber stamp it and we don't know
Or in
what
the,
we're voting on.
or in the past, we have had things like this and we just took no action on
So,
it. It's like out of our scope. It's
should we,
our expertise and we just go.
We did that a lot, yeah.
so to be clear, we don't have a second, so we're not going to continue on this path, which means we're on the next item. All right,
All right, staff report.
Oh,
So
wait, I'm sorry. So on the first document of TIP approved proposal, weren't there two projects on there? And we only talked about the railroad siding?
we talked about rail, and then the other one was the river crossing, and.
No, the river crossing is the river crossing is on this document, correct?
But I think they're both real stuff.
Okay, can we go back to the other report that we just,
Real thing, we probably gonna approve this all.
okay. What is, it's, help me read it here.
I believe we voted on this as a batch.
this is a new project being added to the TIP.
Yeah,
Okay, so no, so there's two on here. There's directed, TIP to add two new Virginia Passenger Rail Authority projects. Virginia State Sport Amtrak operations, we didn't talk about that. And Potomac Creek Third Track South. All we talked about was the Potomac Creek
Third track.
South.
yeah.
So I remember there was 2 and 3. So again, if we can,
It might just be,
for two different projects, they got funding sources for each one of them.
this was the one we.
Yeah, see, there's one. We didn't talk about this one.
Gotcha.
I'm not saying we need to, we could just ignore it and not, be
Well, do I have,
ambivalent on it, or we could.
They're purchasing new trains and routes, to operate to the Norfolk route.
Talk about expensive.
What does the
yeah, but beneficial.
Norfolk route have to do with us in this area? How many people would actually use it?
I've used it multiple times myself.
Go to North?
Well, you don't go to Norfolk. What you do is you go from here to, it runs from DC to Norfolk, right?
In Richmond.
And Richmond. So it's, you don't have to use the whole route. I mean, you can, trains are
Here's the
a
trick,
nice
because
experience.
they are we are a stop along their network, and they basically need to get improvements, or need to have their TIP approved by every single stop along the way.
I have seen a new locomotive, on that short train in the last few days, actually.
I have to say, this is what I would be most comfortable supporting of everything we're considering here.
I guess what.
My apologies, I forgot that one, so I was focusing on the project that was.
I guess what concerns me is just operating expenses. It doesn't say infrastructure.
Operating expenses for transit are part of our transportation improvement plan, so we actually do include that, so even Fredericksburg goes, operating expenses are included.
So am I correct in saying that the Newport News train and the Richmond route are ones that come through Fredericksburg and would go to up north?
Yeah, they were.
Right. So they support people living in Fredericksburg, whether you go to Newport, there are trains coming through Amtrak that you could get on and go up to work or whatever. So this is, so it adds more capacity on the railroad track, or not more capacity, more activity on the opportunities to travel
Yeah.
on the railroad that's what this is doing here. Very, very expensive to do that, I see, but it's, we've subsidized VRE, Amtrak only. So that's why it came to us, is because the trains are passing through us and our people would be getting on and off.
So do I have a motion on this one?
This one I would vote to approve.
Motion to endorse?
I would second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Are we, any objections to moving on to number 7 on the agenda?
Wanted to make sure we were
That's a good
comprehensive.
catch, 'cause
Thank you, that's a good one. Do better now.
Okay, the TAC, I would say the core thing that the TAC met for a 3+ hour long meeting, they approved a lot of the same items coming up, is that the call for congestion mitigation, air quality, carbon reduction, and STVG process is one now open, and they've amended their procedures of how they direct FAMPO to score projects that they submit. So if you're a resident of Stafford, Fredericksburg, or Spotsylvania, or utilizing any of the transit providers, right now is the time to apply for a pot of funding for the fiscal year 2030. As well as if you're in North Stafford, there is 28 and 29 funds also available that went unused from the previous rounds that we're just rolling over into this call for projects. This includes everything from roadway projects to transit projects to bike ped, including studies. So if you have a particular project that you want funded, reach out to both your elected officials and county staff. There's only about $5 to $6 million available, so don't expect new lanes on 95, but Spotsylvania does put that into this pot to try to get some money for it. But it's a small pot, but if you have something, go ahead and reach out to your elected officials and or staff, because otherwise it'll be county staff picking the projects probably, and with input from their elected officials. So they probably already have in their mind what they want to apply for, but go ahead and advocate for the projects you want for that. So that was the big thing, because they revamped it. We're making it more objective, we hope, so that the scoring methodology is more robust with a lot less eye squinting of determining what project's good or not. So you'll see those scoring results you saw previous rounds earlier in the year, but we're going to have a new one there. That pretty much took the bulk of the CTAC agenda. So you want to go to the policy committee meeting next? They focused a lot. There was a long discussion on the 3D map. They approved the public comment periods. Let's see here. They've approved the Safe Streets for All action plan, and they reviewed some of the transportation alternatives programs. So it's about $2 or $3 million worth of projects for mostly bike ped and sidewalks. They reviewed those items. And they also discussed the smart scale, which is the statewide kind of state funding solution for a lot of big projects. But the 3D model took up a considerable amount of conversations from them. So that is the TAC and policy committee updates. And again, now I'm kind of jumping ahead, but FAMPO and Smart Scales called for projects are coming up. So as a citizens agency, hope folks either jurisdiction staff or elected officials for the projects you want, because basically the call for projects is starting to open up for the next round.
What happened with that, with the smart scale changing their,
That was like an hour of conversation. With the policy meeting.
So the gist is Smart Scale looks like it's going to try to restrict, put a bigger emphasis on funding large projects with local matches. So as a region that doesn't have an authority, which is kind of going to be leading up to the next conversation with the policy committee, that we've been very competitive in the past, pulling in funding to try to fix some of our transportation challenges. We are probably going to be at more and more at a disadvantage based on how some of the conversations were happening at the on CTV level for a smart scale. So we don't like the reduction in the number of projects, because we tend to get funded more often, half the time, which is above a third of the time average the rest of the state. So we'll basically there. So
and then remind me what they said they were going into a work session next meeting for, because that was a big topic.
So there is a funding, visioning, and discussion items of what is available for us to try to find revenue for transportation projects, being cognizant that one of our smart scale, which we've been competitive, it's going to be probably a bigger lift, because we've been very competitive of getting, I would say, medium-sized projects funded, and smart scale says, no, we want to fund big projects. And Smart Scale in its review says, if you're going to fund big projects, the way you get accepted is you bring in a large match. So you have to bring, it's going to be, I won't say pay to play, but it's moving more and more in that direction. But I would say that's happening at the federal level, and that's even happening at the local FAMPO level as well.
But I remember the discussion being partially inspired by the map of congestion is so bad here, we have to spend money here in order to improve traffic conditions. And then that led to that discussion.
Discussion about a transportation district,
Yes. Among other options, I think,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
which we have to get General Assembly to do.
Yeah, but it's more likely to happen if we're taking action at the local level, right?
Because right now, the General Assembly has quietly, we found out after the fact that somebody's advanced something kind of on our behalf without a lot of local input. And so now it's like, let's have the discussion so that we can drive the discussion rather than hearing it after the fact and saying, well, we weren't consulted, and then that doesn't work very well for a lot of legislation if you don't consult with the area that you're.
Have we consulted with our local legislators about this? Has there been any conversation there, do we know?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Especially since one of them is a member on this particular committee.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Next item,
Okay.
unless there's
So,
any further discussion.
VDOT report problem, Al, I think you had, and I will pull it up.
Okay, thank you.
So we have that, as well as we also have the VDOT webcam of that area that we can actually look at real time.
Yeah. I can briefly explain.
The Sanford Drive, Warrenton Road.
Yes, that intersection. And Connor, at some point, I'll ask you to kind of just stop it for a second, but go right ahead.
So could you go ahead and kind of talk
Yeah,
what it is, because I've seen.
this is the, okay, stop it when the vehicles, well, we can stop it right there if you want, actually.
We've got some time to watch.
Okay, okay. This is approaching Warrenton Road from Sanford Avenue, heading north on Sanford, approaching Warrenton Road. It's the intersection that would head across to South Gateway Drive where the Target is and so forth like that. But as you can kind of see it, as the vehicle stops here, and Connor, you can just stop the video right there for a second. There are 3 lanes, okay? There's one lane on the left that is a through lane and also a left turn lane. There's a lane where the white car is, which you can't see it right now. And the whole point of showing this video was there was a lot of signage and a lot of road markings that you probably didn't even see, which the vehicles on the road don't see. And then, of course, the right lane is supposed to be for making a right-hand turn on red that goes into the Route 95, southbound lanes right there. So
You'll kind of see. So it's a right turn lane in the center, but it does not allow for a right on.
now notice this vehicle was stopped at the intersection where they can only go on the southbound Richmond lanes.
You know, they're jumping across. In theory, you're only supposed to be able to pull into that lane. That vehicle's kind of doing it correctly.
Are we saying people should follow traffic laws?
But basically, if you're staying on Route 17, heading east, you need to be in the left right turn lane. That does not allow a right turn on red. And what you have is folks who are just going into the far right turn lane, who are then proceeding on to Route 17 east, basically cutting across 2 lanes of traffic.
And this,
That one,
yeah, this one is undetermined at this point what they're gonna do. And if you can just stop the video for a second right there. What the predominant problem actually is when that lane that is supposed to continue on Warrenton Road going, going southbound, the one that actually goes under the 95 overpass, that winds up being a problem because you have 2 vehicles that cause this issue right here, and this happens every single day, where the red line does what it's supposed to be, but the people who are in the right lane also cut across, and they often cause very, very close accidents.
I'd be shocked if there are no accidents there.
There haven't been yet, as far as I know, but it's only because of huge amount of honking horns and
Right.
yelling at people and that kind of stuff. So as if you want to advance the video from this point, that,
It's marked on us, on the asphalt down there.
right,
95 right.
It is.
Which it is, same as it is coming down.
But that's a full block before the turn.
Yeah.
if you went back further in the video, I actually, at various points, I showed what you can see when you're at a certain spot.
I think we got it. So you're asking for improved signage and some other things that you're.
Right.
Okay.
And the other thing is,
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly why there are
Okay.
4 traffic lights for
Especially when service town was.
That's strange.
Do you remember that?
because it makes it a little bit more confusing.
That's not uncommon for left turn lanes.
Target.
That would be like a dedicated turn arrow.
Right.
Would be through the journal straight and or left turn.
Good restaurant day.
So
And
you see that
the-
in color.
The other thing that winds up being difficult is because the traffic lights do line up with where the actual lanes are, but I understand why.
Also, this may not be the final configuration for this because the changes at the 1795 are still ongoing. I mean,
See,
more.
If we had a sign similar to that,
Yeah.
I think it
mocked up.
would be pretty visible.
Yep.
And that was my recommendation essentially.
Do we want to take action on this? Can we make a
I'm
suggestion?
just gonna pass it on to VDOT.
Yeah.
I'll pass on to VDOT. There we go.
That's it. We don't have to take any action. A member's already approved it as something.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, for the sign that says no turn on red from this lane, that's the ones that being somewhat confusing to the vehicles and to the drivers. So if there was a sign there that possibly said that you were going to continue on Route 17 from that lane only
Yeah.
and not to make a turn, that would probably be more beneficial.
I'm sorry, John, can you pull that back up? Try around 2 minutes in the video. Yeah, Al, did you talk about where you have sign written?
Yeah, I'll just stand up if I can.
I would almost say, if folks know like Central Park, if you're heading out into Route 3, they have the left turns a lot better marked. You kind of need that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
And also, as someone who lives a little farther, quote unquote, north on 17, because I don't know why it's north, but I do know why it's north, but it's annoying. You need those signs also earlier in 17, because what happens is 17 on that side is 4 lanes. The right 2 are 95 approaches. And so on any time after 4 o'clock on a weekday, anytime on Sunday evening or Saturday morning or midday Saturday, those are parking lots. And you have people going in and out of there. And then the poor folks who just want to go to Target, or the poor folks who just want to, not take 95, which is what I usually do, don't know that only the second from the left lane is what's going to bring you through. So there should also be a sign that says through lane, left turn lane, and right turn lane that is earlier so that people can make those
And
adjustments.
that ends up putting you in the left lane.
Yeah, if you're in the far left lane, you're getting on 95 north.
I know when I'm driving a truck down there, of course, we always try to stay in the right lane. It's like, which one
Yeah.
I want to be in going.
Which road?
Sanford.
Sanford's right here,
Sanford
so
is
this is
right
the 2 turn lines coming on.
So
So let's see if you don't see any of the.
Yeah.
If you stay in the one, otherwise you end up in the left turn.
Yep.
Now,
If you're in the left side.
And good luck getting out of that if you make a
Yeah,
mistake.
that's a mess.
be cool if there.
And you have a lot of speed to make.
I mean, cool's the wrong, not the word, but it would be
Poetic. Be poetic.
cinematic.
You might get an actual accident.
Well, look at that speed, dude.
For the construction that's still going on at the overpass and it's gonna be 3 lanes that are coming off of 99 out right here that are going to head in this direction. The left-hand side.
I mean, I understand.
Making the turn onto Sanford, there are ultimately going.
Hey, Alan, please, we're not gonna resolve that in this meeting. We're bringing this up as a problem we want VDOT to look at. That's
I'm
what
just
it's going.
trying, I understand, I'm just trying to explain them. because some
We
people-
got, we agree with you, look, that's,
She works well behind the Arby's. She works with the police.
Well,
we agree.
Okay.
it's obvious what they need there.
Yeah.
Traffic circle.
Turn into-
Traffic circle onto 95?
That's not a Cloverleaf.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think that's something else.
Like, they definitely need to look at that.
Underground traffic circle, let's keep it cheap.
I actually think that they probably needed a slip lane that's separate before Sanford so that Sanford traffic isn't trying to cut across from that, but.
So you're telling me northbound 17, when you go to go on, you're gonna have to make a left turn lane to get on 95 when it's said and done,
Yeah.
just like Route 3.
Well, no, they're gonna actually they're gonna open that Cloverleaf,
It's the Cloverleaf
quarter back.
coming 17 to 17 or 95 north, 17 north, they're doing away with?
No, it's,
Which one are they doing away with?
There we go.
it's 17 south to 95 north that they're getting rid of, I think. Is that right?
This is the
Yeah.
northeast one.
Which is where we have to back up that tunnel from last.
Which
Oh,
goes,
so they're-
turning on 95,
Oh,
you're going to have 3 turn lanes. Northbound, and there's gonna be 1 lane to
if we're building a triple left turn lane, something is wrong.
Sounds like an accident waiting to happen.
It's idiotic. If you're gonna have 3 lanes turning left, you should have a bridge.
Let's have congestion pricing on the 3 lanes.
I think we had it, the people with the cardboard signs are out there.
One will be hot,
There you go.
Aren't they?
and the sidewalk.
prison. So, yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's
Two
completely
right,
so it's that are going to be able to.
Yes, and there's no
Up there.
walkways there, and they have,
I think that's really necessary.
there's a what?
There's a one way out.
go.
Put it-
Right, but that's not,
This is gonna be open.
that's not really acceptable. Yeah.
It's what eliminated.
All right, so I think we're, sorry, I think we're pretty much agreed that that's not fun. Did we want to take action on that in any way or propose future action, moving on to items?
You already reported, right?
You reported, but what, well, I would just on VDOT.
We
Yeah.
haven't acted. I can see it.
But we want.
VDOT wants to have a.
Are you thinking of good solutions?
That-
I mean, I'm gonna pass it through it, and then I'm gonna ask, hey, can you come talk?
Okay, that works for me. Moving on.
Disregard it or.
Any
They should get that.
Any other member reports, topics of interest?
Yeah, I just want to say that, we're emphasizing all these improvements, but there's really no northbound 95 improvements between Centerport Parkway north of 95. So what's going to happen is the 3 new northbound lanes are going to merge with the current 3 northbound lanes. I'm talking about the local lanes are going to merge with the 3 northbound lanes every afternoon because the hot lanes are going to be going south.
Mm.
So every afternoon, we're going to have 6 lanes merging in a long stretch between Route 17 and Centerport Parkway. 6 lanes are going to merge to 3 lanes. And there's nothing in the future that's going to address that. And I've been watching the northbound 95 every day. I've been going south on 95, and I've been seeing the traffic build up on the northbound side as I pass it. And every day between 1 and 2 o'clock, it starts getting backed up almost all the way to exit 126. And I can just see that happening with, northbound 95, 6 lanes to 3 lanes. And we're going to have some serious issues. And there's nothing addressing it. We really need to get a new north-south road on the west of 95 so the local traffic can get where they have to go without getting on 95 and dealing with that bottleneck that's gonna happen every afternoon.
Even that, have some sort of incentive to live close to where they want to go so they can walk and take a bite.
Well,
But that's, but the,
the affordable housing.
but the incentive would be a bus service on the new road plus a trail system. And where you connect the population centers with the destination centers with the shortest possible route. I mean, that just makes sense.
Okay.
And there is,
I have a topic of interest. I mentioned to the VDOT lady a couple meetings ago about these emergency vehicle weight limit signs. Remember me talking about that? I still don't have, everybody's telling me it's for fire trucks. But I've seen it on more than one bridge. I've seen it on over a dozen bridges now. And it baffles me. So, and it's weighed on me. Also, back in the day, I used to get a heavy, what do you call it? Overload permit to move the big excavators. And when I first started getting them in 1998, they would give me the permit and they would make me print out the bridges I was not allowed to cross because I can't. And today, they'd be better off handing me the 1 sheet of paper with the 3 bridges I can cross than the New York phone book of the ones I can't cross. Okay? And this has been weighing on me a while. In fact, I've even told my kids when they were 5 years ago, I said, listen, when y'all grow up, I want y'all to be the weatherman because you can get paid to be wrong every day. Okay? Or you need to be a bridge engineer because every bridge in this country is going to be rebuilt in your career, during your career. So the other day, I just happened to be down at the Virginia Ag Expo at a farm in Virginia Beach. And I was talking to a guy about corn or something. And the guy rides by on a golf cart. Said, the governor's speaking in 10 minutes. The governor's speaking in 10 minutes. I was like, oh, the governor's here. So I took the two boys I had with me, they're college kids. And I said, listen, let's go listen to the governor. And he talked about agriculture, stuff like that. And afterwards, I said, let's just see what the crowd does if they disperse. We might get a chance to shake hands with him or something. So they did, and the kids had Virginia Tech hats on, and it was a ag thing. So he said, anybody associated with Virginia Tech, come on up here, let's get a picture with him. So my kids got to go. I told the state police guy that was doing his protection, I said, I just want to shake his hand and tell him I think he's doing a pretty good job. And the guy says, fine. I was the last one to speak to him before he headed to his car. I stopped, I said, Governor, I'll say you're doing a good job, I think. And I want to tell you, we need to fix our bridges. This has been weighing on me. I can't sleep at night because of the bridges. I said, you've got to figure out how to suspend the environmental permitting so we can fix the bridge that's already there. And he says, I don't think I can suspend it, but I think I can deem them compliant with the environmental regulations. I said, well, whatever you do, you're only a one-term governor, so get it done. Let's go.
And there are categorical exclusions normally.
Anyway, I've went away from it feeling like I got it off my chest. I got to the guy who had to do something about it. And so that was my topic of interest. And I got one chance to talk about the governor, and I talked about transportation issues.
I got one real quick input, it's really for you, because you'll be representing us at the policy committee.
Okay.
Unlikely, but they could ask, why do you have this mismatch, or why did you say yes and no to these items? You need to have something ready to say, well, you don't often do that, but because it's a little unusual, it might come up, and I doubt it.
Mm-hmm. And the sense, so I
I could
remember.
turn to you and ask that question.
Okay, and so the sense, as I remember it, is that we felt that we were concerned about one, pricing, and then the details of this, and we weren't presented with the details of how it fixes the problems that are there. Are we all okay with that?
Yeah, we couldn't look at that.
And then we've also in the past had a president actually, when a subject comes up, say, I want to tell you why we didn't approve this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't expect you to do that. I mean, I don't think it's required, but good, yes,
Policy.
that was just a one note
Yes.
for you.
Okay, thank you. I am new at this, so I appreciate that.
You mean here?
Mhm.
And I just had a question to follow, because I wasn't here last meeting. It was about the road coming off of Princess Anne, making it turn on Hazel Hill to go onto Caroline Street. Have we heard anything about them putting up something there? Or asking the upholstery, the guy who owns the orange vehicle at the upholstery to please not park there? And when I was, going up there to do whatever I do, this, Fred bus almost got hit. We were both stopped. Can't see over that orange vehicle that's there. And this black SUV came out of nowhere.
The other thing is with the detour now, everyone's coming through there.
Yeah,
Everybody's coming through there now.
and my concern is, back there is the, adult, and the adult daycare where I take my mother to. I don't wanna get hit, my car's paid off. I do not wanna get hit out there. But that orange car is such a big obstruction there. You really cannot see, but now I'm noticing that it's not just there. A lot of people are throwing up by the firefighters and you can't.
Who's
The
the city guy?
City, it's a parking issue.
Yeah.
They're directed there. More of the follow-up is, I do believe that from that, including other parts of Dixon, have been added to the Safe Streets plan that we're currently under, so that's actually going to get a more detailed review. So we're actually asking for a consulting firm to basically say, tell us what to do for this project so that we can actually chase federal funds. So that's going to be immediately happening. Can work on the parking issue item, as well as the development of basically solutions for that, because that has been identified as once we add to that
So,
project.
when is this gonna happen? Or after someone get hit something?
It's basically like they just approved the consultant to go ahead and start working
So,
on our safety action plan.
so
Yeah.
the issue is, we have to get a consultant to say it's dangerous so they can fix it. Is that my understanding? Because I think that's what we're gonna pay somebody, tell them that it's dangerous.
Well, just like we were reporting a problem for VDOT, who do you report a problem to in the city? Yeah, but,
And nobody told me.
yeah.
Amy Jackson, Mike Gregg, any
Will the transit council have anything? She's like, I can't see where it's.
Jamie wears two hats. So it's one over Fred, but she's also,
I'll
I'm
find.
trying to think
I'll
of
go
who the
see.
parking person
No,
is.
with her often, I'm just, the whole thing is, we have these little pockets of danger. And as a community member, I don't live in a community, nobody knows who to go to about this issue or that issue. I feel when you ask, they say, go this person, that person, to somebody else.
My comment as a member, particularly if a member of the CTAC, is that you can go and directly say to the elected officials as a representative of CTAC, particularly, this is a item of concern. Like, one of the roles of CTAC isn't just to sign off and tell me what to do, it's actually to advise and advocate to the elected officials. Like, that's a designated function of the positions.
Understand, so as a new person, don't do politics at all.
Bless you.
Because
I know.
I don't know who to go to. I just found out who was my representative for the Board of Supervisors in my area. I'm from Philadelphia. We don't have that. If you have a problem with transit, you go to transit company. You got a problem with City Hall, you go to City Hall. Here, it just feel like I'm going to 101 million different people and getting candy. And something really needs to be done in that area, but not just that area, there's other areas too. But that area is kind of dangerous, only because you got the kids out there at Hazel Hill who go out there and stand for the bus. You got people taking their parents and loved ones up to the nursing home, right? So my thing is, I still can't fathom getting a consultant to tell us that it's dangerous.
Well, I mean, we're doing that across a 5 jurisdiction area, but that comment made us specifically add that to kind of the list that we are going to be doing, at least from what FAMPO can do. And all the jurisdictions are basically putting in a small amount of money to meet natural funds, so that then any project that does go forward, it's not necessarily just on the burden of the local taxpayers, that they can actually be eligible for federal funds to come in and help pay for the project. So that's the reason why we added it to the safety action plan.
So do any of the consultants, do they live in the area with these problems? Or are they outside and neutral?
Well, what he's talking about, you weren't at that meeting last time, but they were talking about a grant that they got from the federal government to study problem areas where accidents have happened and try and fix them.
But near
With
misses
federal
are not
money.
recorded. Near misses are not recorded.
Actually, we do have, there are ways of finding safety items that are not just falling where crashes were reported. We can actually work with other factors in areas that say this is actually a likely place that either is unreported. Some of them were like, okay, yeah, there's a bad bridge, low bridge, like that pops up. But even approaches around turns in other areas that were like, hey, there's something else. Some of the committee members said, hey, we know these are dangerous. It's a kind of a done, obvious thing. But we're like, it's done, obvious thing, but the feds want us to go do our homework before we have them write a check to come in and fix these. Otherwise, any jurisdiction is going to have a huge list of problems, and they're going to just say we have this much money, and they're going to work down the list. So
who's the public works person in the city now? Was Doug Fawcett, but he's been retired for a while.
The transportation plan.
Yeah. What's Mike Craig's position?
It's,
capital prep.
It's not boss.
Who?
Chuck Johnson?
yes, that's right. That's.
And again, I understand I'm on this committee, there's a purpose why I came on. I don't know none of these people. So where do I go to meet them so I can say, hey, this is the issues, here's everything. Where do you?
I mean, I would pull up. So if I'm not an employee of FAMPO, and I wasn't an employee of the NPO,
I'd go to city council meeting.
I would have been upfront in public comment in city
Yeah.
council and says, so-and-so has nearly been killed 3 or 4 times. Actually,
All
I've
right.
come up and said this, I've done it for another where there was a fatality. We just have fatality. Folks have been saying this is dangerous for years. What are you going to do? And eventually that's when the CDOT said, okay, fine, we're going to fix this issue. I don't want it to get to that issue, but unless you're going up and basically grabbing the ears as citizens, 'cause I can't do this because technically they're my bosses, but you can go up and grab the ears and say, hey, this is an issue, and this is how the Citizens Advisory Council isn't just advising me on items, it's advising the elected officials, because you're supposed to be kind of a consolidated super group of citizens that are informed on these issues that then say, hey guys, I want you to do this because this is what folks are carrying. This is what I've been talking to other folks in my community about. And this is how I want to see things move forward, because if you don't, then it's whoever else is having conversations with them
Okay,
and their needs.
I've got 2 other suggestions. One would be to go to one of the TAC meetings, the technical, our counterparts, the technical guys, people, and go there. If you just go a little before the meeting, say, who's here from Fredericksburg? Fredericksburg plant. I want to talk to them about this intersection. Just talk to them, inform them. I'm on CTAC, so you've got some credibility. They should listen to you. And just not formally going to say, I want to talk to you specifically about this. That brings us to the transportation planners of the city of Fredericksburg, what you're talking. And the other is what we went through just prior to this was the VDOT report a problem. That where any citizen can go online, or there's probably an 800 number as well, but you go online and you say, here's the problem, which is what Alan did. He went and he said, I got this problem, so the reporter's on there. And it
That's,
That's
what
what.
you talking?
Problem is, it's in the city, so be that.
But they will, they're gonna accept it. They're not, they're gonna be the primary action on it, but at least it's been accepted and documented and then would be shared.
Chuck, as well as Mike and the rest of the city staff, they're sitting right next to council during most of those meetings, because
Right.
they have stuff that like I have to sit and report.
Right.
So you're going to basically be telling them, and then eventually one of the city council members who's interested is going to turn on and is like, what are you doing about this?
Right.
Maybe not in the meeting, but
Yeah.
at some point in time, they're going to say,
And when you're approaching it from a freedom of direction.
Mm-hmm.
Can you write your email down for me?
Just want to put it words.
I do still have job.
Yeah. Oh, one of those.
So even getting to just, not telling you first of all, to get to this meeting, I'm a caretaker for my parents.
No, that's
So
true,
I
yeah,
can
but
be
it's
out.
working. Okay.
Yeah,
Just
So,
Just say, that's one.
so,
time is money.
yeah, now I work during the day.
Yeah.
no, I was enough.
Send it. Yeah.
Aside from one of my previous jurisdictions, they might have said, okay, if you're gonna fuss this place, I'm gonna put you on all these advisory committees.
I think that's why I'm here. I was complaining.
I think that's why
coming
I'm
all the
here
time.
too, yeah.
Well, I joined because I don't feel y'all doing it. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's probably why all of us are here.
Yeah. All right, have we all expressed our topics of interest, member reports? We good on that? Any future agenda items? No? Okay, public comment. Any members of the public who are wearing an invisibility cloak? Online?
We adjourn.
Any seconds?
Second.
Discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Not with your feet.
any opposed? All right, so adjourned. Thanks. Very fine.
So.
Just now.